point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 549th edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and the amazing Tom Fennell.
In the flesh.
In the flesh, but not in the studio. Tom is staying home because he's lazy. Okay. Are you there, Tom? You seem to have been...
I'm here.
Okay. Your laugh seemed to end so fast that I wondered if we got cut off. Okay, we're starting the show with news from November 9th. We're recording it on November 20th. So
my notes say it's November 15th.
Really? Well, it's not November 15th. It's
The 9th. We've done the 9th already.
This is November 9th through 19th. And we start...
I don't know how we call it, but my file starts off with a small nuclear reactor.
Yeah, and right above it, you'll see the words Thursday, November 9th.
Well, my book says Thursday, November 15th.
Okay, I don't know how it happened.
But I don't know either.
For those
looks like it'll work anyhow.
Yeah. For those who are watching, because the studio was closed last Thursday and will be closed next Thursday for Thanksgiving, what we did was we're having for an edition of Energy Week that goes from November 9th through November 19th today being the 20th. And these are taken from my blog, geoharvey.com. You can go there and click on a date and find the article if you're interested in reading it, or you can look below.
Them are definitely worth reading.
Yeah, absolutely.
These people know what's going on.
Yeah. You can go below and you can find a couple of ways to get to the specific thing that Tom and I used to set the show up. And our first item of the day is a story about a nuclear reactor, and what you're looking at right now is a model of...
You pronounced it wrong. It's supposed to be nuclear.
Nuclear. Yeah, well, I'm going to call it nuclear. If you want to call it nuclear, that's your business.
Well, the President of the United States, two presidents of the United States called it nuclear.
Yeah, at least two. Okay.
And one of them was, in fact, a nuclear engineer.
That's right, he was. And he did some real dangerous disaster work in Canada. Okay, this is an item from oilprice.com. What do you have for a title?
Pioneering nuclear project gets canceled after cost surge.
Yeah. The first nuclear power project in the United States with a small modular reactor has been canceled.
Hooray!
NuScale Power Corp was building the reactor in partnership with the Utah Associated Municipal Power Systems, but the estimated cost of electricity produced by the reactor rose from $58 per megawatt hour to $89 per megawatt hour, and that is one huge increase.
We can't live with electricity at that price. I mean, what the hell? Who's kidding who?
Yeah.
That was a 50% increase.
Yeah, and more actually. The approximately 50%. Yeah, that's going from 5.8 cents per kilowatt hour to 8.9, and you know that's raising the price 3 cents per kilowatt hour. How would you feel if all of a sudden the price for electricity that you were paying was increased by 5 cents per kilowatt hour, which is possibly the equivalent where we are? It's just too expensive.
I don't pay for my power; it's included in my rent.
Well, there you go. If we all had power included in the rent, we'd all be able to get away with it, whatever it is. Okay.
Let's move right along. We got
Let's
another
do that.
nice picture here.
Of fog.
Fog.
Yeah. And the article comes from ABC News. ABC News is American Broadcast Corporation. We have two different organizations called ABC, and one of them is the Australian Broadcast Corporation. But when we see ABC News, it's American.
ABC.
Yeah,
This is ABC News.
that's right. That's how we tell them apart. But we kind of have to explain that, I think, to people who watch. So what do you have for a title?
Why? Super fog is continuing to create dangerous driving conditions in Louisiana.
I think that's Louisiana.
Huh?
Louisiana.
Louisiana?
Louisiana. That's right.
I don't know what you're trying to say.
I'm trying to say Louisiana the way it's really said by people who live there.
Oh, okay.
I'm doing a very bad job of it. Okay, relentless drought conditions fueling the persistence of marsh fires burning in parts of southeastern Louisiana are causing ongoing superfog events in regional highways during peak commute times. Some highways were closed due to dangerous condition. I got news for you. Some highways were closed due to unbelievably big collisions that involved way over 100 vehicles.
Well, people are moving in Louisiana to get out of dangerous fog areas.
Yeah. Yeah. Should we go on, Tom?
Can't chance.
Okay, we
Friday,
have a...
November 10th.
That's right, thank you. We have a picture of a wildfire. Actually, we don't see the fire itself, we see the smoke, but you can tell it's a wildfire by looking at it because it has a kind of a orangey peachy color down close to the bottom, which is because of fire behind the smoke. And this is also from ABC News.
White House announces new efforts to prevent wildfires and limit smoke hazards.
The White House is announcing an interagency focus to protect communities from wildfire smoke and prevent large fires that put communities at risk. And an MOU, that's a Memorandum of Understanding, was signed by the Departments of Interior and Agriculture along with the Environmental Protection Agency and the Center for Disease Control.
Well, the smoke can be pretty dangerous without even seeing the flame.
Oh yeah, absolutely. People die from the pollution and the smoke. It's not good. Okay, move on.
Moving right along.
Okay.
Got a picture of a Jeep.
Charging in the middle of nowhere.
But of course, it's charging in the middle of the desert, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, how did the guy driving that Jeep know how to find that Jeep charger? I'll bet he had one of those.
Got a special GPS unit.
Yeah, he might have a special GPS unit. Yeah, or maybe there was just a big sign and we can't see it. This is from Clean Technica.
Let me quote: Jeep's electrification game plan: Wrangler, Wagoneer, and more are going electric.
Yep, exciting. Exciting times are coming for Jeep enthusiasts, so Jeep is set to take up a giant leap into electrification. Jeep outlined some plans for the next 5 years, promising to electrify some of its most beloved models, including the Wrangler, Wagoneer, and Grand Wagoneer.
Well, this is inevitable.
Oh, yeah, it is.
The electric car has arrived.
Yeah, it has.
Years late.
What's that?
100 years late.
100 years late. Well, 100 years ago, they had electric cars.
They had electric cars.
Yeah.
But for some crazy reason, which I'm sure had to do with profit, we didn't have electric cars anymore.
I knew a guy once who owned a Stanley steamer.
A Stanley steamer, boy,
Yeah.
wow.
And he said that vehicle got, I think it was 50 miles on a gallon of heating fuel and a gallon of distilled water. Had much better mileage than any gasoline-driven car, and its top speed was unknown because nobody ever drove that fast.
They didn't have the roads to do it on.
Huh?
They didn't have the roads to do it on.
That's right, but he said that the Stanley steamer was an extremely safe vehicle, and it was put out of business by bad information that was spread by other companies saying that the boiler would blow up.
They wouldn't do a thing like that.
No. They wouldn't do a thing like that. Okay, we're up to Saturday, November 11th. We have a picture of a solar power system.
That's what it looks like. It looks like a solar array, and according to the article, it's in Kentucky.
That's right. And this article is from PV Magazine USA, and it's just amazing. Go ahead.
Kentucky regulators approved plan for 900% increase in renewable energy.
900%.
That's more than Pepsi Cola.
That's right. Now, the problem is when you hear a couple of things, one of which is percentage or percent, another is efficiency, you should always have a little bit of a flag go up that says, wait a minute, you don't know what this means until you know what it means. But let me read the synopsis. The Kentucky PSC, that's the Public Service Commission, approved a plan for Louisville Gas and Electric and Kentucky Utilities to retire several fossil fuel plants and replace them with 977 megawatts of solar and a 125 megawatt, 500 megawatt hour battery system. This
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, this will be a 900% increase in renewables. Well, what that tells you, really 900%, that's a lot if you've got a lot to start with. What they've got is something less than 100 megawatts now. So
okay,
it's a big increase, but it's not.
It's a big increase from a small number.
That's right. It's a big increase from a small number. That's the way to look at it. Okay, should we go on?
Fantastic. We got a picture here of a graph. And why don't you explain what's on that graph?
Okay, this graph is Brent futures prices. In other words, this is the price. This is a graph of prices. This is a graph.
This is a graph of demand for gasoline, isn't it?
No, it isn't. This is
it's money.
This is a graph of the spread between the price of crude oil futures and the price of the price of oil that has been refined, futures for those. In other words, they've got futures for crude oil and refined oil. And what a future is it's a contract that a person can buy that will allow him to sign to. It's a contract that a person can get on a market, on a futures market, like a stock market.
It's kind of a speculation, isn't it?
It's what?
Kind of a speculation.
It's kind of a speculation. But what you're doing is you are guaranteeing for yourself that you will be able to buy, in this case, oil at a specific price on a specific date in the future. And you know it can be a speculation. This is the kind of thing that I would strongly advise anybody not to get into just for the purpose of speculation. You know, play poker. It's more honest. This is.
Well, let's read the title, which says, and I quote:
Yeah.
Low U.S. gasoline demand is making gasoline less profitable.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting?
Yes. Now, I wanted to get back to that graph. What the graph is telling you is the difference in the price per gallon between refined oil and crude oil as a future. So
it's cost of refining it.
Yeah. Well, no, it's the cost on the market. This tells you how profitable it is to refine oil.
Okay, so it's not directly involving oil. is involving people's reaction to oil.
Sort of. But it tells you whether the refineries are expected to make money.
Yeah.
And obviously, at one point here in this graph, they're expected to make $1.40 a gallon. And at one point, they're expected to lose 20 cents a gallon. And right now, the expectation is low because it's...
Well, if they're low, if they're less profitable, fewer people are going to invest in them.
That's right. Okay, this is from Clean Technica. Let me read the synopsis. Low gasoline demand in combination with the seasonal switch to winter-grade gasoline has made gasoline less profitable to produce, reducing the difference between gasoline feedstock and crude oil prices to multi-year lows of around 17 cents per gallon in October of 2023. So I feel like
They had a price war, and 17 cents a gallon was the cost of electricity at that. I mean, of gasoline at that time.
You know, my father told me that when he was a young man with a car during I guess the Depression, a young man with a car could go fill up his tank with gasoline at a cost of 5 cents per gallon.
Wow.
And, you know, you could drive around all afternoon and evening with your girlfriend for $1. So, anyway, we have a picture of James Hansen. This article is from phys.org.
Now, what is James Hansen famous for?
James Hansen was the first person to testify before Congress that we had a problem with climate change. Now, I want to point out that happened, I think, in 1983. That was more than 20 years after scientists went to Lyndon Johnson and warned him of exactly the same thing. But James Hansen was the first person to do it in public.
That's interesting.
What do you have for a title?
Read the title there.
Yeah.
World temperatures will blow past the Paris goals this decade. A Search new study.
Right. A paper by scientists of a dozen institutions say the world's average temperature will surpass 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times much sooner than most forecasts. It says extreme action is needed or they will reach 2 degrees above those levels before 2050. Now,
2 degrees doesn't sound like much, but it is.
Oh, it's horrible. We'll get to what happened in Brazil, and then you'll understand. I want to make note that we will talk about this next week. Actually, it's the week after. It's next week.
Well, now while we got the chance.
There was a report in the news today, this morning. We will talk about it. That temporarily, over the period of some hours or a couple of days, the average temperature in the world did hit 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times. But our next picture is a picture of a GE Haliade X turbine going to sea.
That's interesting. It's all there.
It's all there, and it's on a barge. You know, this is a very small vessel compared to the ones that we normally see, you know. Anyway, this is from Clean Technica. What do you have for let me put it up so people can see it. I just find this fascinating picture. What do you have for a title?
Vineyard Wind 1 installs the first 858-foot tall GE Haliade X wind turbines.
Okay. We hear a lot about offshore wind installations that were halted as economic calculus changed, rendering some of the projects unprofitable. Here we have some news about forward progress with Vineyard Wind 1 off the coast of Massachusetts. Now, one thing I should mention, there have been a bunch of offshore wind projects that have been canceled off the coast of Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, and so forth. That doesn't mean that they're never going to be done. In fact, all that really means is that they are going to be put out to bid again, And
Uh-huh.
that's just what it is. The companies that canceled them canceled because of a combination of two things, one of which was there was unexpectedly high rates of inflation. So the bids that they made were not...
They were skewed.
Yeah. And the other thing was that the supply chain was messed up. So they just found they couldn't do it.
3 feet tall is pretty big.
Well, if if you take a rule of thumb of 10 feet per story, that's 85 stories.
Yeah.
I don't think there's enough air above Brattleboro to make a building that tall. Okay. Our next item is from IEEE Spectrum.
That's the Triple E, the electrical engineers book.
Yeah.
Or magazine.
Yep. We're up to Monday, November 13th. I actually gave a speech to the IEEE on one occasion. It was a very bad speech. The people who missed it were better off without hearing it. Okay.
There's a picture of, let's call it spinning machines, and I'll explain why they call it spinning machines.
They don't look like any spinning wheel I've ever seen. Okay.
Spinning mega machines will safeguard the Baltic power grid as it desynchronizes from Russia.
That's
This
a
is
real...
important.
Yeah, it is. That's a real word, by the way. Desynchronize is a real word.
Yeah.
Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia recently accelerated a plan to cut electrical chains that keep them tied to Russia. A technical linchpin to their planned escape from the Moscow-controlled power zone is a set of synchronous condensers. And what's happening here is that
I'll explain something and then you explain it more. A synchronous condenser is a motor whose shaft spins freely to adjust to conditions on the grid.
Okay.
So the motors aren't doing anything as motors, but because of the idiosyncrasies of motors, they're affecting the transmission grid. They're balancing it.
Brilliant, Tom. I don't need to say anything else. That was great. Thank you. Okay, we'll go on. Having
Moving right along.
Yeah, we have our next thing, which I looked at it and I thought, what are we going to do with a hobbit house?
A house, isn't it?
This is a hobbit house. No, this is a yurt. No, it's not really a yurt. It's a, what?
Oh yeah, the walls are canvas, aren't they?
Yeah. So this is from the BBC. What do you got for a title?
Tourists are rethinking their relationship with the earth.
Yeah. Echo B&B. Ever hear of that? Well, this is from Echo B&B. That picture is an accommodation that's listed on Echo B&B's website. It's based in Italy. It lists over 3,000 properties worldwide, from a vegan and organic farmhouse in Tuscany to an Echo Mountain Lodge in Costa Rica. Travelers can filter their search to find specific interests such as plant-based food and EV charging stations powered by renewable energy. Who'd have thought? Yeah.
It's an interesting picture of basically a tent, isn't it?
It's if it isn't a yurt, then it's something that I think was very clearly influenced. Its design was influenced by a yurt. So, do you know what a yurt is?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, basically it's a tent. So our next story is we have a picture of the Travers Wind Energy Center, and the story is from Renewables Now.
And it shows a big
Wind turbine?
wind turbine.
Yeah.
Looks big to me.
Yeah. Looks big
And
to me.
there's in the background there's
More.
They're not smaller wind turbines. They're just farther away.
Yeah. What do you have for a title?
AEP, which means American Electric Power, to spend $9.4 billion on regulated renewables. What?
Yeah.
What are regulated renewables?
They're renewables that are regulated. That's the best I can think. The American Electric Power Company plans to invest $9.4 billion in regulated renewables over the next 5 years as part of a plan to add 21.5 gigawatts of diverse generation in the period of 2024 through 2033. This is according to AEP Chairman and President and CEO Julie Sloat as she discussed AEP's 5-year plan.
American Electric Power is a holding company.
Yeah.
They in turn hold a lot of electric power companies all over the country.
Yeah. Yep. I don't have an answer for what regulated renewables mean, but I suspect that means that they're being signed in a situation where their energy is dispatchable day or night on demand.
I think it's got something to do with how much they can charge for their power.
Yeah. This would mean that it would be on contract so that it will go out as needed. So, let's go on.
Moving right along.
Yep, we have a picture of an EV, and this is a Hyundai EV.
It comes from Clean Technical.
Yeah.
Clean Technica.
That's right.
It says, I quote, electric vehicle sales continue to grow. Duh. Despite what some automakers are saying.
Yeah, the future of the car is electric. A fact.
Say that again.
The future of the car is electric. A fact that many of the world's automakers have publicly stated. But over the last month, several automakers have said the transition from gasoline to EVs needs to slow down, partly due to low demand. This is a tactic. And when they say it's a tactic, what they mean is, or the author means is, don't believe it.
Oh, what?
The author says that is a tactic, the idea of saying it needs to slow down. And the author is actually saying, don't believe that. That's not necessarily true. Okay, let's look at New York City. We've got a picture of New York City up.
Is that New York City?
That's New York City, and there is an EVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft.
Yeah, there it is, right in the middle.
Right in the middle, yeah. I have not...
I was just going to read the title.
Go ahead.
First electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft to fly over New York City.
Yes. A 4-passenger EVTOL aircraft has flown over New York City. And this is a picture of that aircraft actually over New York City. It's very different from the Volocopter that recently flew over Tampa. The Joby electric aircraft can go 100 miles on a full charge, and Joby estimates that a flight from Manhattan to JFK Airport will take about 7 minutes.
Not enough time to have a cigarette, is it?
No, and my bet is that they wouldn't let you have a cigarette in that thing. Okay, let's go to Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah, there's a picture of Rio, isn't there?
Yeah, it sure is.
Loaf in the background?
What's that?
The mountain, is it Sugarloaf?
I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I know there's...
Rio, anyhow.
Yeah, there's that crucifix that is up on the mountain.
I can't see that.
I don't know the name of the mountain. Anyway, this is a scary story, so why don't you tell...
I can see the cross now. I was thinking of the mountain in the background.
Yeah, I don't know. So what do you have for title, Tom?
Health warnings as Brazil's gripped by an unbearable heat wave. It is unbearable.
Yeah, this is crazy. Red alerts have been issued over almost 3,000 towns and cities across Brazil, which are enduring an unprecedented heat wave. The city of Rio de Janeiro, in the city, temperatures were as high as 52.5 degrees Celsius, which is 126.5 degrees Fahrenheit.
I've never seen temperatures like that, not even in Saudi Arabia.
Unbelievable. Officials attributed the heat to El Nino and climate change. And then I put a note on this because it didn't say in the article. So I looked it up and I put this note. This set a record. The old record was 109.8 Fahrenheit. So
I'll call it 110.
well, I'm gonna call it 109.8. It's not 110. So the new record is not in the decade above. It's in the second decade above. It's in 100. It went from 109.8 to 126.5. That's quite a jump.
Oh, sure.
I mean, when you see a heat wave broken, it's usually by half a degree or 0.2 of a degree, or if it's a really big jump, 1 degree, or maybe even 1.1. This was 16.7. This is crazy.
It is that.
Yeah. Anyway,
You know, we got to stop playing games.
we got to stop playing games. Now, this next picture, Tom, is one of the best I've seen.
Explain, please.
This is a picture of a cottage in Portugal with a wind turbine in the background. On the
Yeah,
left.
there it is. That's a cottage, isn't it?
It is, and it was built using 2 gigantic boulders for opposite walls.
Yeah.
Okay, this is from a publication called Canary Media.
Portugal just ran on 100% renewables for 6 days in a row.
Yeah. Portugal started decarbonization with some legacy hydropower, but neither nuclear capacity and it has neither nuclear capacity nor plans for any. That meant it had to figure out how to cut fossil fuel use with new renewables. It committed to building renewables in pledging a 2050 deadline for net zero carbon emissions in 2016. And I want to tell you, this thing of 6 days in a row, that's a record. But Portugal has been building up to this for years. It hit 100%, and then it hit 100% for a few hours, then it hit 100% for a day or two, then it hit it for several days, and now it's done six days in a row.
And that part of the picture that looks like a bird flying is a generator.
Yeah, there's a wind turbine to the left of the cottage.
Yep.
That's what it is. Okay.
Which I'm sure takes care of all the electricity needs of the cottage.
I would bet that it does, although that particular cottage might be off grid. Yeah. It might.
Well, I'm glad we don't have to say the name of the picture, the person who took that picture.
I can make it up, but I'm not going to. Okay, we're moving to Ireland. Would you like to do that?
I wouldn't mind it. Ireland's a pretty place.
It is. PV Magazine is the source of this, and that is a castle. That's a small castle. That castle is small enough that it's quite possible that nobody ever lived there. Yeah.
Well, Ireland holds firm on 8 gigawatts of solar by 2030, by a 2030 target.
Yep. The Irish government said this week that it expects to install 8 gigawatts of solar power by 2030. The government said PV should reach existing levels of onshore wind, roughly 4.5 gigawatts by mid to late decade. The government said that Ireland will hit the 8 gigawatt target by use of existing instruments. What they mean by instruments there is probably financial instruments. So they're talking about bonds and banks and stuff like that. One thing I should mention, by the way, we talk about buildings being net zero and so forth, and those castles. Tom, have you seen many castles?
Have I what?
Seen many castles.
I've seen a few, but not many.
Well, some people like to look at pictures of them. I've been in a few and seen a few and so forth. Those castles, this castle does not have a chimney.
Never thought of that.
Never had a fireplace. That's why it didn't have a chimney.
Uh-huh.
Why didn't it have a fireplace? Well, because fireplaces are a fairly recent invention. Now, by fairly recent, I mean that they were invented in the Middle Ages, but in the late Middle Ages. And probably the single biggest difference between a medieval manor house and a Tudor manor house is that the Tudor manor house had fireplaces.
That's interesting.
Yeah. What did you do without a fireplace? Well, you had a big, big, big room with a very high ceiling, and you had a louver on the ceiling, which was it was a structure that was open to the wind, but it would prevent rain from coming in. And you'd build a fire in a hearth in the middle of the room, and you'd fill that room with warm air and a lot of smoke, and it was.
Well, in Ireland today, central heating is a rarity.
When I lived in England, my parents knew exactly one person who had central heating in his house.
In the wintertime, everybody gathers together in one room.
Yeah, and wearing top coats, facing the fireplace.
You're right.
Okay, we're up to Friday, November 17th, and we have a picture of an EVTOL. No, this actually is, yes, it's hydrogen, but it's still EV because the hydrogen is producing electricity.
It just seems a little strange to me, because how do you get the hydrogen?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is from energy.gov.au.
Aircraft brings low-emission flight to the skies.
Yep. Australian government funding is helping a startup, AMSL Aero, to develop a new hydrogen-powered aircraft named Vertia. The Sydney business received $5.43 million under the Australian Renewable Energy Agency's Advancing Renewable program after a prototype was developed. Now, Tom asked an extremely important question here, which is, where does the hydrogen come from? In order to be considered... What?
Electricity, of course.
Well, that's the thing. Most hydrogen, 99% of the hydrogen that's used in the world comes from natural gas or coal.
Uh-huh.
And it uses those. It comes from natural gas, or they use coal to make it. The move now is for green hydrogen, which they get by hydrolyzing water using renewably generated electricity.
Green energy.
Green energy, that's right. And it's called green hydrogen. So our next item, we have a picture of a truck trying to make its way through a flooded highway. And
yeah, it looks like he's got about 10 more feet before he stalls.
Yeah, I mean, it's a serious problem for vehicles. You don't want to do this, particularly in a place like the Southwest, where you can come to what looks like a puddle, and it's actually an 8-foot deep dip going down to a stream.
Hey, you can't tell how deep the water is from the surface.
No, you can't. This is from ABC News. I drove down a highway one day and was coming to a thing that looked like the road was wet, but so what? And I saw a tractor trailer coming the other way, and it hit that water, and it threw the water up so hard, so fast, that I could not see the tractor trailer anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. What do you have for title?
Florida flooding closes schools, knocks out power.
Yep, more than 80,000 customers were without power in Florida on Thursday morning after torrential, I know a person who calls that torrential. Torrential rain and winds topped 65 miles an hour. Parts of South Florida near Key Largo recorded more than a foot of rain in the past 24 hours. Miami saw a whopping 7.53 inches of rain, setting
That's incredible.
yeah, and it's a new daily record. And we are up to Saturday, November 18th. And we have a picture.
Look at those funny-looking things.
Yeah. That is a picture of a GE Verona 6 megawatt turbine. Actually, two of them.
6 megawatts. That's a lot for a turbine.
A land-based turbine, that's huge, really.
First wind turbine produced as GE Verona's New York facility.
Yep. This is from Power Engineering International. GE Verona's onshore wind business, announced that it has completed the first onshore wind turbine produced at its new wind manufacturing assembly line in Schenectady. I know Schenectady. I know where it is.
Oh, yeah.
The unit is the largest onshore turbine ever manufactured in this country. So,
I can believe that.
yeah, that's why I said it's huge. 6 megawatts for offshore turbines is not that big because they have turbines that go up to 15 or 16 megawatts. But the problem is if you're going to have a 6 megawatt onshore turbine, it's going to be the same size as the offshore turbine, but the blades have to be transported and the nacelles have to be transported. All of this stuff has to go on roads. And
We've seen pictures of that.
Huh?
We've seen pictures of that.
Yeah, we're going to see a picture of that. Anyway, I will go on to the next item, which is a Candela P12 ferry boat. And this is from ABC News also.
Hey, it's elevated. It's sitting on hydrofoil.
Yeah, it's up on sticks. Yeah.
Swedish hydrofoil ferry seeks to electrify the waterways.
Yep.
Now that's from Candela, and their main business is light bulbs.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I used to do business with them.
Really? Well, they have a business in Sweden doing electric boats.
This is something new for them, but
Yeah.
obviously it's profitable.
Well, they've been doing it for a while, and we've had several stories about Candela's boats.
Absolutely.
Speeding through Stockholm's archipelago, the new P12, I love that word, archipelago. It looks so unlikely. The new P12 vessel by electric boat maker Candela barely makes a sound as it glides over a meter above the water. That's 3 feet 4 inches. Its developers hope the ferry, which was unveiled this week, I'm sorry I'm stumbling over all of this, will introduce a new era of public transportation on the water. And that boat, I don't know how fast that goes, but some of those Candela boats can go, pretty fast. I'm talking about 40 miles an hour, that sort of thing.
Well, they're cutting down the resistance of the water to their speed.
They sure are, and that's important. So, there it is.
There it is. So we're looking at Sunday, November 19th.
Which was yesterday, and it's our last day. So we have 2 stories left, which means we're moving much too fast. But, nevertheless, maybe we should go back and start over again. This story is from Clean Technica.
And it says, and I quote, U.S. and China agreement sets the tone for COP28.
The United States, that picture, by the way, is from 2022. The U.S. and China will back a new global renewables target and work together on methane and plastics pollution. Now, the thing of plastics pollution was very important.
It is that. We don't only think of it, but in parts of the Pacific and, I guess, part of the Atlantic, there's huge gyros of plastic just sitting there.
Yeah. They announced this in a joint statement after a meeting to find common ground ahead of the COP28 talks. The 2 countries account for 38% of the world's greenhouse gases. Now,
That's the U.S. and China together, almost half, huh?
yeah, well, certainly over a third. And this is something that I have seen. Well, I mean, there they are in the picture shaking hands, Joe Biden and Xi Jinping. There are reasons why the United States and China should be in agreement on things, and climate change is certainly one of them. And this is being in agreement with China is something that would be far more advantageous to China than it would be for the United States,
I would think.
because they have a huge amount of renewable energy products being manufactured. I don't know what the actual percentage is now, but I think in the past it was up to 95% of all solar photovoltaic panels were being manufactured in China.
For China.
Now we've got in the United States new facilities coming online to manufacture those panels, and the Indians have been in competition with China for a long time and have been building up their own PV manufacturing plants.
Well, they got enough room to use all they can produce themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. And one of the interesting things about that is several months ago, I came across a story about a Chinese manufacturer setting up a factory in India.
That's interesting.
Isn't it? There are reasons why the United States and China are kind of acting like enemies, and one of them is the attitude of Americans toward Taiwan. And you know, the United States basically has recognized, and this was one of the things that Richard Nixon did. They basically recognized that China is the Communist government of China is the legitimate government of China. And unfortunately, when the United States did this, it meant that we had a choice of either recognizing that Taiwan was an independent nation, which was going to cause a complete mess if we did it at that time, or we had to tell China that we were going to treat Taiwan as though it were an independent nation, even though we recognized that it wasn't. And, you know, taking that position...
That's a little bit twisted, isn't it?
What?
That's a little bit twisted, isn't it?
It's a little bit twisted, and it means that at some point the Chinese are going to come back to us and say, wait a minute, you people have been telling us for 50 years that you believe that Taiwan is part of China, and you're not letting us exercise our government there. But, you know, this is one of the big problems, and the Chinese have been trying to extend greater and greater control over waters that, you know, parts of the Pacific Ocean, Philippine Sea and so forth, that are far closer, for example, to the Philippines than they are to China. And it's in some cases areas that the Philippines claims are its own, and the same thing is true of other countries. Vietnamese are at it with China over that. And by at it, I mean they're just upset at each other. So what we're talking about now, is...
Well, China is a capitalist country trying to pretend they're communist.
That's pretty much the case, as I see it. They've always acted as though they were capitalist, and it's always, you know, families trying to keep value in the family. But here we've got, in this particular story, and stories like it, which have been coming out in great numbers recently, we've got the point of view that China and the United States have areas to agree on. And climate change...
They are generating a lot of greenhouse gas.
China is generating a huge amount, and so is the United States.
Absolutely.
China produces the most, and the United States produces by far the most per capita.
Well, China's a big country.
China is a big country, almost as big as the United States, and it's got a population that is a much, much, much bigger population than the United States has. So yeah, it's a big country, no question about it.
Well, let's move along.
Okay, our last story. We were talking earlier about why it's so hard to get a big wind turbine put up on land. You know, why the six...
We've talked about this before. We've seen pictures of it.
Yes, we have. This particular story is from ABC News. And what do you have for a title?
Wind turbines begin 700-kilometer journey inland from Geraldton to a $1 billion Kathleen Valley lithium mine.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the geography that much.
Well, this is in Western Australia. There's an area of Western Australia called Goldfields, and it's, as I remember, a little bit south of central Western Australia, which means if you were to impose a map of Australia over a map of the United States, Goldfields would probably be in Colorado and New Mexico.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. And this is in the in the northernmost part of that, which would mean that, you know, your mine would be near Denver if in that superimposition scheme. I may be way off on that, but I'm not. I'm somewhat off by that. Let me put it that way. Anyway, they're taking these 5 turbines, which have 15 blades, and you're seeing a blade on the road there.
Yep.
And
big.
It's big. And okay, let me read the synopsis. The first of 15 gigantic blades. Yeah, you could live in one of those. Will make up 5 wind turbines. Has left Geraldton Port on a 700-kilometer journey. That's 435 miles inland to a $951 million lithium mine that is being opened up in Western Australia's northern goldfields. Now, the thing about these wind turbines is that they have to be put in and installed so that the mine has electricity. People in the United States would I think possibly have a very difficult time envisioning what's going on in Australia, particularly Western Australia, although it's going to be true of, well, northern...
Well, most of Australia is really highly unpopulated.
Highly unpopulated, yeah. And this is true of South Australia, it's true of the Northern Territories. To a certain degree, it's true of Queensland. And by highly unpopulated, it's like, yeah, you've got a bunch of cities, and in the middle of them is a desert like the Sahara. And you know, there's what's the biggest city in the middle of Australia? You probably know it, Tom.
I do.
Yeah, Alice Springs.
Yeah, right. That's right. Yeah, right.
It's almost in the middle.
Almost in the middle.
It's a city. Why? Because they happen to have big springs there. And what that implies and why that's important for energy is that if they're going to have a lithium mine that's going to cost $951 million, and by the way, that is Australian dollars, so it's probably about 700 million US dollars, that mine is going to be using a lot of electricity. How do you get electricity to it? Good question.
You generate it there.
Yeah, you generate it there because you're going to spend a ton of money getting the transmission lines there. And so what they're doing is they're spending the money it takes to put up 5 wind turbines to supply the electricity. And I would expect that they will have wind turbines. They may have solar panels and batteries as well. By the time they're done, I would expect they would have all 3. But 15.
Well, it's a desert, and deserts generally have wind.
They generally have wind, and they generally have sun, except at night. Yeah.
That's a revelation, isn't it?
Who'd have thought that, you know, you go out in the desert and yeah. So the thing that's happening here is they're I'm going to put that picture back up again. They're transporting that wind turbine. That truck is, you know what it reminds me of, Tom, is those hook and ladder trucks
Yeah.
that had a guy driving the back.
Steering the back, Ray. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
And I was told, you know, when I asked somebody about that, how do they do that? And I was told, well, you really have to practice to do that properly. But they could get those trucks around corners much better because the front end had a normal steering wheel and the back end had wheels that would steer also. So you could keep the back from following inside the track of the front tires.
Yep, that was the idea.
That was the idea. And that way they could have very long trucks go around corners on fairly narrow streets. Well, this picture reminds me of that, and I wonder if they have under the blade, there is certainly room that they could have a cabin and a guy in it steering the blade, the back of that blade.
I would say they would almost have to.
Yeah, I don't know that, I haven't seen that, so I don't know that they're actually doing it, but it just seems like it would be the smart thing to do. And of course, they've got to move the nacelle. This thing is going to be tied to a hub on a nacelle. And obviously, the nacelle has got to be bigger. And you can tell by looking at the bottom of that thing, that truck, and then the big hole in the thing behind the truck.
Yep.
That thing, you could drive a car into that.
Yep, for sure.
You could, you know, if you wanted to go camping in one of those things, you could do it and be pretty comfortable. So there you have it. So Tom, that's the last item that we have.
So I have my traditional goodbye. You don't come back and see us now, you hear?
Yeah, you're jumping the gun just a little bit. I wanted to bid everybody an emotionally rewarding week. That's what our last slide says. Have an emotionally rewarding week. And I'm going to wave goodbye. And Tom is going to wave goodbye. I'm waving goodbye now.
Where's my cat? Come on, we need you.
Tom's cat, for those who haven't been introduced to Tom's cat, waves with his tail. So
He's a little guy.
he's a what?
Nice little guy.
He's a nice little guy who spends 23 hours and 45 minutes a day sleeping.
Napping?
Well, that's what cats do. They nap and eat. And that's what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
They
right.
do it well.
That's right. So, bye everybody, and goodbye to you, Tom. Thank you very much.